But I'm so glad that you're here tonight. My name is, again, Dr. Leah. I think everybody here, but the class that we're talking about tonight is Detoxification 101. My background is in biology and anthropology and then chiropractic school. And in chiropractic school, both Dr. Scott and I did quite a bit of work in functional medicine and nutrition. And so it's still a passion of ours. We love the NSA piece of what we do, and that's really kind of the deepest passion. But we also love really being able to support the body nutritionally so that we can enhance healing results. And we know that lifestyle has such a big role in that, how we eat, how we think, how we move. And so we want to really support the whole picture. And what's so cool about a detoxification program is that it really supports decreasing inflammatory levels within the body. So we heal so much more efficiently when our body is supported. And we're going to talk about this tonight because there are people that, how do I say that detoxify very well. And there's people who are moderate detoxifiers, and there's people that are really poor detoxifiers. And that it really depends on genetics, but then lifestyle combined with genetics, or the field of epigenetics, really helps us understand how we can best support someone. And so I have a lot of clients that have benefited from a detoxification program throughout the years because, again, when you support that system, our bodies can heal so much more efficiently and clear out inflammation, which is always a really great thing and can help us feel so much better. So I'm just going to go through the information, but we have a smaller class tonight, so I will try to check the question and answer box that I have periodically throughout the class. But if I see a question and I feel like I can't get to it, or it doesn't really flow with where we're at in the class, I will save those questions for the end of the class, but I will make sure that I spend time and allow time for answering those questions. So please feel free to participate or type in a question into the chat box to make sure that so you don't forget it. So Detoxification 101. Okay. So let's look a little bit about the problem in general. I think most of us can agree that sadly we live in a fairly toxic society. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the process of detoxification and the plan that can best support your body. And so I just want to make sure that everybody's clear on what a toxin is. So anything that interferes with good health. So this might be things that we're breathing. It could be things that we're putting on our body. It could be things that we're ingesting. We could even think of thoughts or emotions as being toxic at certain times, but things that are interfering with our health. And then we need to understand what a xenobiotic is. And that's a chemical or a compound that's foreign to the human body. So it still can maybe be ingested and processed by the human body, maybe not in a great way, but it still can be taken in, but it's foreign to the human body. And so the things that we need to make sure that we understand is really your body detoxifies itself at every single cell. At the cellular level, it's detoxifying itself all the time. But the major systems that are involved in this process have a lot to do with digestion, respiration, and the integumentary system, or the skin. And that I will say is one of the biggest detoxifiers that our body uses on a consistent basis is through the skin. So we're going to talk about that because, again, I want you to be well supported, not just when you're doing a detoxification support process, but really anytime. I want you to be being able to detoxify on a consistent basis. And it's fascinating to see people as they go through this process, because when you support detoxification, they often sleep better, they breathe better, they feel better, they have better energy, they lose weight more easily if that's the goal, or they might lose more body fat. It just really depends on the individual, but we want to make sure that it's kind of like thinking of detoxification as a lifestyle, how you can support that, as well as what you can do on what you can do is more of a very specific supportive process that maybe you do at different times of the year to support your body. And we'll talk about why you would do that. Okay, so I will keep going through here. And I apologize. I just finished adjusting about 2 minutes before I started the call. So I might have to take a few sips of water and drink some water here as we're working through this information, but I apologize. So, okay. So are we toxic? Yes, we are toxic. I think, again, when we look at the studies and we look at the research, it's important to realize that since World War II and since our nation has become so industrialized, there are so many synthetic chemicals that are constantly being approved to be used, whether they be in body products, whether they be in food, whether they be in cleaning products. And we use so many pesticides and things in our farming processes. But we think about it, so 8 pounds for every man, woman, and child, 4 billion pounds of pesticides used annually in the US. So that is in our food supply. Every time we eat out at a restaurant, there's certain things you can control and there's certain things that you can't. And I think it's really important trying to figure out, okay, I'm aware of this information, I'm knowledgeable about it, but I also live my life. And so it's kind of finding that balance. When I educate about this kind of stuff, I don't want people to become afraid of going anywhere or, ever eating out at a restaurant or traveling or whatever it may be. I still want you to live your life. But it's something to be aware of that most of our food is grown with pesticides. And so there's a lot of chemicals that we're exposed to. So there's the way that our government works, we have lots of different pesticides that are being approved on the foods that we eat. I think it's also important to just take a look at your home. So 3 to 10 gallons on the average home are hazardous materials, or the average home contains 3 to 10 gallons. So it's a lot of things that we're exposed to that are in our air, possibly just in the cleaning products that we're breathing in. 400 synthetic chemicals can be found in the average human body. So our body is absorbing those things. It's having to hold on to those things, process those things. And so it definitely increases the toxic load that our body has to detoxify on a consistent basis. And so the thing about that is that we actually come into this world with quite a chemical load that we're exposed to. So there's lots of chemicals that are found in just the umbilical cord of an unborn baby. So you think of we're born with a high chemical load. We're having to deal with it pretty much on a consistent basis, which is living our lives. The other thing to realize too that we didn't really talk about as well is that stress just in general can increase inflammation, which can make our bodies more toxic in general. So again, none of this is meant to scare or to stress people, but also how do we deal with this? What is important for the aspect of that when we look at toxicity testing is that when things are monitored, and how do we say that? When there's a multitude of chemicals in one product, they're often only tested to see how the most concentrated of those products will affect someone. So when we look at this, most chemicals that are released into the environment aren't tested until after they have been released. So the FDA would say, well, we're going to test something before it's released to make sure it's safe before it's released. When we look at chemicals, it's very different. Cleaning supplies or paints or whatever it may be that people are exposed to, maybe in their workplace. Maybe they work in an engineering kind of facility or something like that. Those chemical compounds are first, usually only one of the chemicals present in that compound is actually tested, but also the whole philosophy of that is that they release that chemical and then they wait to see what happens. They don't really, and it's very difficult because there's very little safety monitoring done after it's been released. And so I've worked with many, many engineers. I mean, we're in Golden, so we see a lot of School of Mines grads and students and people that work in different kinds of engineering environments. And often over time, if they're working in a shop kind of environment where there's lots of oils and synthetic chemicals that are used and they're exposed to, their skin almost it's secreting that. You can smell it on their clothes, but you can smell it on their skin. And so the body is constantly working to try to get rid of these things. But when we look at what's actually happening, it's not really being studied or tested. It's very disturbing, actually, of how they expect people to be exposed to things for a long time and then figure out what the long-term effects were of that chemical, of being exposed to that chemical. So it's a very different system. This is basically what I just talked about, that chemicals are assumed to be safe and then proven toxic, where a drug is typically assumed to be toxic and must be proven safe. So it's a very different system when we're thinking about chemicals that may be in a workplace or cleaning or different situations that we may be in. It's really a different kind of a situation in general. The other thing to realize about chemicals in general is that there's a synergistic effect. So if someone is a cigarette smoker, they're increasing their risk of lung cancer by 10 times. If they're exposed to asbestos on a consistent basis, a 5-time increased risk of lung cancer. But when you combine the effects of both smoking and asbestos, there's an increase of 55 times of the risk of lung cancer. So it's a multiplicative effect, which means when we're exposed to a lot of chemicals, it can really increase the burden for our bodies many, many times than if we were just exposed to one thing over a period of time. So all kinds of different categories. We have pesticides, we have organic compounds, we have toxic metals. Those are a lot of the things that I've seen with a lot of our patients are heavy metal toxicity or metal toxicity. Plastics, food additives, preparation byproducts, cosmetic additives, even contacts that people put in their eyes. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we're exposed to. And again, it's not to freak out about it, but it's to be aware so that maybe we can make better decisions or we can support our bodies. So additional environmental toxicants. So this is a big one that, again, that we actually see a lot of, and we don't think of it in Colorado being a big deal, but the mycotoxins from mold. You can find some of those things like mycotoxins even on coffee, on peanuts. Mold can contaminate a lot of those products, but we also work with a lot of patients who've had chronic mold exposure in their homes. And it's kind of crazy because, again, we live in a pretty dry climate, but it affects a lot of people. And I work with a lot of clients that maybe in the past, like, covered up, maybe they found black mold in their bathroom. They kind of did a quick remodel job and went on with life. And then because that mold wasn't sufficiently dealt with, it causes severe health issues over time with long-term exposure. So that can be quite a detoxification process to deal with that. There's medications or lifestyle chemicals. So people who maybe they're on a medication for a long time period. Maybe they, have a glass of wine every single night, eventually 2 glasses or 3 glasses of wine every single night, and that gets to be a toxic burden for the body. I see more and more patients coming in with a diagnosis of fatty liver. And one of the best things that you can do for fatty liver is really do detoxification, support the liver and help the liver function better. And then there's things that happen within our preparation of foods. So the char-broiled meats, nitrosamine for cold cuts and sausages. So the actual preparation of those foods is what can cause the issue and cause that more of like a toxic burden to happen for the cells of our body as we start to digest and try to use the nutrients from those foods. So as we go through this is the thing that I was referencing earlier about people vary so much. So if you're exposed really to maybe a small amount of toxin, but a long duration, or maybe it's a very heavy amount of toxin over a short duration, it really, how we look at how an individual would be affected by toxicity. So we look at the potency, we look at how long they were actually exposed for, what was the dose of that, the genetic factors are huge, and the environmental factors. So all of those different things make a difference in how our bodies are able to cope and deal with it, as well as how long we need to detoxify for. So what we'll talk about tonight is a 10-day detoxification program that Dr. Scott and I have put together over the years, and we've altered, we've changed it, we've improved it, we keep working as different products come out that we feel work better. We've changed up this program many, many times, and we've gotten it to a place where it can really produce awesome results for people. But when you think of if someone was exposed, for mold in their house for 3 years, doing a 10-day detoxification process isn't really enough. It's a great reset, and maybe it's something that they use to kind of periodically after doing a longer and bigger detoxification process. But this process, what we're going to talk about tonight, is kind of like a way to kind of reset the system, really get the body some good healing nutrients. And so I'll talk about that process. But there are very many situations that we use longer detoxification programs for, so like autoimmune conditions, but also heavy exposure for longer durations of time. So here we look at what do people feel like? So when people have been exposed to toxic situations, or maybe they're genetically not a good detoxifier, what they may notice over time is that they have a lot of sensitivity to environmental types of shifts and changes. So if they walk into a restaurant and maybe there's a lot of different food smells, they may be incredibly sensitive to that. They may be incredibly sensitive to a perfume and notice that they get a headache as soon as they're around that perfume, and they can't get rid of the headache. It's all, let's see, what another good example, going into an environment where maybe they had mold in their home and they moved and they go into a situation where there's mold, they may notice that immediately, where they get a headache or they feel dizzy as soon as they're around that moldy environment. So a lot of sensitivity to smells, to chemicals, to odors, medications, anything it affects, they become very sensitive. They may have a lot of fatigue. They may have depression, anxiety, mood swings may be related to that. Some people will notice when they've had long-term exposure, poor memory and concentration. Learning disorders can be related to toxicity. My dad's an engineer, and he would go in and out of it like a shop kind of situation, like I was referring to earlier. And over time, his memory started to be really affected, where it's like he couldn't think clearly. He had difficulty remembering kind of like his tasks of what he needed to do. He was actually on some of the detoxification protocols that we use in the office for years, and it made such a difference. And in the first couple of weeks of that, I remember he felt very irritable, kind of depressed, but as he went through that, after a couple of weeks, he felt so much better, so much clearer, better energy, better sleep, made such a difference. Okay, so weight gain can be an issue with toxicity. Some people, because of the way their digestive system is affected, it can increase weight gain. For some people, they have trouble gaining weight, but it is very common with long-term toxicity to have weight gain. Some people have headaches, some people have muscle aching and weakness, some people will deal with neuropathy, recurrent infections, infertility. So I will tell you, when I was in chiropractic school and I started doing a lot of the functional medicine training, one of the most common things that our teachers and professors would say is that detoxification is often one of the most powerful things that you can do nutrition-wise when you're starting out on a healing journey for someone. And so that's why we're so passionate at the office about detoxification processes, because it can make such a dramatic difference in resetting someone's physiology and helping them in their healing process. So as we go through this, then what we look at is how is someone's system affected? So cancer can be a result of long-term toxicity. Endocrine and metabolic disruption, meaning maybe thyroid is off. That can, the parathyroid, there's different metabolic processes that can be really disrupted if someone has, if they've been inflamed and toxic for a long time period. The immune system is highly related to toxicity. So when we think of like autoimmune conditions, allergies, one of the most common things that I ever want one of our patients, like if someone is dealing with long-term allergies, I would love for them to detoxify, to get rid of some of the sugar in their diet, sometimes dairy, for a period of time, to see if it makes a difference, because often chronic allergies, or just even chronic, like someone's nose dripping, their eyes being inflamed, can be from just having an underlying, like their body is toxic. They need to really cut down on the inflammatory load or whatever is causing the inflammation within their body. And often the allergies will clear up with that process. Cardiovascular disease is highly related to toxicity, especially when there's that, when someone is very toxic, it can increase the inflammation within the arteries, which can affect blood flow and cause damage to the arteries. And so highly linked with toxicity and cardiovascular disease. And then there's the neurotoxicity piece of that. So last month we talked about the keto diet and really improving brain health. detoxification is also another key player in terms of brain health. So anything that can lower inflammation within the body, which detoxification is one of the key processes that does that, all that we can really support the body to help the brain and help cognitive function, but also just long-term brain health as well. So these are all the disorders that are exposed, that are linked to chronic toxic exposure. So when we went through a little bit of the allergies, autoimmune conditions, reproductive disorders, when there's long-term issues with the gut and inflammatory bowel disease, atherosclerosis, a lot of the things that we hit on. But if you have any questions about that, please feel free to type that in. But I think from a lot of what we talked about, it will hopefully make sense. So how does our body handle all of this? So again, what we talked about, our cells are going through the process of detoxification on a cellular level all the time. This is a consistent process that's happening within the body. Metabolic pathways in which the cells have to then transform a toxic substance that's coming into the body, something that the body has been exposed to, and has to convert it into something that's more inert, that can be safely handled by the tissues of the body, and then can be excreted from the urine and the bile, sweat. But we'll talk about what those pathways look like in a little bit more detail. So once you start to understand detoxification pathways, what can make such a difference is that you understand why some things work really well for detoxification, why other things don't. Because what so many of my patients have said over the years is that they've tried detoxification often through fasting, often through maybe drinking like grapefruit juice for an extended time period, or things that will often support one part of the detoxification pathway, but not the rest of it. And when you're only supported in one part, that's when people can get really ill. So we're going to talk about that in more detail. So, I gave you some examples of things our bodies would have to detoxify: taking Advil, breathing in fumes while you're driving, drinking a glass of wine or alcohol, eating a more processed food. And in no way am I saying that you can never eat a bagel or a donut. It's not my favorite, but I'm not saying that you can never do those things. But those are things that are going to have to be, your body's going to have to work harder to get the nutrients. And when your body has to work harder to get the nutrients, it creates more inflammation within the gut. And so part of this, again, is life. It's things that we're going to do and we're going to be exposed to. But again, how do we support our bodies, and how do we figure out if we're a great detoxifier, or maybe we're not a good detoxifier, so we can support that. So the thing to realize too is that the majority of toxic substances are fat soluble. And because they're fat soluble, those toxins have a greater affinity for adipose tissue or higher fat tissues. And so if our bodies are not sufficiently excreting these chemicals or being able to detoxify well, we hang on to them in our fat cells. And so because we're hanging on to them in fat tissue, it also makes it a little bit harder to get rid of them, because your body, it's kind of like, it's harder for your body to let go of fat when it's toxic. And so it's kind of a tough situation. But again, when we support detoxification, things move a lot more easily. So your body stores toxicity in fat. And what happens with that is that when we go through any time of high stress, or maybe we're on medications for a time period, or maybe when we were in a higher stress situation, or maybe caring for a loved one, or in a really difficult job situation or whatever, maybe we depended more on sugar or carbohydrates as quick fuel, or kind of like emotional stress eating. There's many different situations that we see and run into. But when you go through those kind of time periods and you're eating more sugar, the body becomes more acidic. And when the body is more acidic, so we're dropping our pH in that time period, acids and toxicity are stored in the fatty tissue, and the body doesn't want to get rid of them. And so again, the more acidic we are, the harder it is to lose toxicity, the harder it is to lose fat. And so we want to help raise the pH of the body so that we can more easily get rid of what we don't want, what we don't want our body to be holding on to. So the other thing that happens then when you have the right kind of detoxification support and nutrients, you actually will decrease your fat mass and you'll increase your muscle mass, which is kind of cool. So you can actually see body composition changes happen when the body is detoxifying itself appropriately. Again, because when we're looking at this, you're actually losing muscle mass, or I'm sorry, you're actually losing fat mass as your body starts to detoxify itself in a healthy way. So I'm going to take a quick break here just to drink water for a second. Okay, so we're going to look at the process, the physiology of what our bodies go through for detoxification. And so what we have to realize is that the body has to convert, we talked a little bit about this, a fat soluble compound into something that's water soluble so that it can be excreted through the urine. And so this, we're going to talk about it because the most used processes of detoxification are called phase 1 and phase 2. And a lot of this happens within the liver, but then parts of it happen within the small intestines as well. So the whole process of detoxification, while it's happening at the level of every single cell in the body, but it's also very highly dependent on the liver and then some, again, small intestine as well. But every single tissue has to detoxify itself at some capacity. So this is just kind of a diagram if you look at it. So we have the fat soluble compound, and that has to be converted into a water soluble compound. And what's so important in this process is it's really important to realize that in the process of moving from fat soluble to water soluble, our bodies actually produce an even more toxic substance. And so we're calling that the intermediate toxic substance. It's activated in that process. So phase 1 of detoxification is when we're getting that fat soluble system or fat soluble compound into the cells. They're going through a process. Our bodies are actually trying to make them into this inert water soluble compound, but just realize that in that process, there's this activated intermediate toxic compound. And so that's how do I say that? So when people talk about doing juice fasts or fasting in general, it doesn't mean that you can't ever fast for maybe a shorter time period. But when people fast for longer time periods, they're actually activating phase 1 of the detoxification process, but they're not giving their body support for phase 2. So where do we get stuck then? We get stuck with lots of activated intermediate toxic substances that are floating around in our systems, not floating around, but you get my point. They're in our system and they're making us sick. And that's why a lot of people feel sick when they do an unsupported detoxification process, or there's lots of fad detoxifier things I heard just sort of run on the radio where it was like, just drink all these different juices. And yes, there's goodness in getting lots of antioxidants, but realize that only supports phase 1. It does not support phase 2. And so we're stuck when your body is like, okay, well, it's trying to get rid of things out of the cells, but we're not actually then being able to convert them into water soluble compounds that can actually clear the body. And so again, when my clients are like, gosh, I've tried detoxification, I got so sick from it, that is why. That is typically why when we explore, okay, what did you do? What was the process like? And we look at the nutrients involved, there wasn't enough to support phase 2. So they couldn't actually get rid of the toxicity that their cells were trying to clear. I hope that makes sense. Oh, I did not mean to do that. So we're going to go. Okay. I hope I'm doing this. Okay. That is so not what I wanted to do. Okay, I hope I'm on a good cell here, or good cell. And my computer's doing really interesting things. Okay, I need to go back though. Okay, there we go. So when we look at this, so the toxin's got to be converted, and what you can think of it is most people are familiar with the term free radicals. Free radicals are it's basically toxicity that your body is creating while it's trying to detoxify itself. And so free radicals can create a lot of inflammation within the body. So one of the reasons that we like to do this class is that we want you to understand what happens or how your body needs different kinds of nutrients as you go through the detoxification process so that you are well supported. So when we talk about, if we go back one slide here and we look at that pink in a toxic substrate that's in the middle of this whole diagram, in order to even get to that point. So we have to go through phase 1 of detoxification, and that is very dependent upon antioxidants. So when you think of like eating lots of greens, eating cauliflower, eating broccoli, eating bell peppers, eating tomatoes, eating blueberries, all of those foods are very rich in antioxidants. So all of those foods are very helpful in being able to get to the first part of the detoxification process, very antioxidant dependent. So B vitamins are also very critical, which are a type of antioxidant, but we want a lot of B vitamins specifically, and then we want antioxidants in the process. So all of that makes a really big difference in the whole process of being able to detoxify into phase 1. Then we go into phase 2. So if we look at phase 2, now our body has to take that intermediate toxin. So we look at the whole pink kind of blob that you see. Now we have to get that to be completely converted to a water soluble compound. And what we'll say about that is incredibly protein dependent. So you need protein to get through the rest of this process. You can imagine if you're fasting or you're only drinking juice, you're not consuming protein. And so at that point, that part of the detoxification process is so energy dependent that you have to have adequate dietary protein to be able to clear the toxicity from your system. And so again, that's why I like supported detox, not fasting detox. I want you to be eating food. It's highly energy dependent process. And so we want to make sure you have the right nutrients. So we want clean, healthy ingredients, but we don't want you to be fasting for a long time period. And so those two activities, when we talked about the antioxidant piece of it, as well as the protein piece of it, are both incredibly important as you go through this so that you don't end up with that pink blob or the reactive intermediates, which means that your body isn't creating more inflammation as it goes through the detoxification process. And so we don't want to be creating cellular damage. We want to be keeping your cells healthy, but that's what produces a really good detox kind of a result as you go through this. And so again, we looked at this whole just a different way to look at it, but what you'll see if you were going through imbalanced detoxification is phase 1 is really amped up, phase 2 isn't supported enough. And so we're not able to clear the toxins from our bodies. And so that can create lots of damage to DNA, to RNA, to proteins within the body. And that's when people feel pretty miserable with detoxification. So that is exactly what we are trying to avoid. And so everybody's different, but there are certain types of drugs, certain types of foreign compounds for the body, even certain types of nutrients that can inhibit phase 1 enzymes. So kind of odd when you think of like different like juice fasts that people are often doing, not appropriate in terms of a balanced detoxification process. And so that can lead to a lot of actually the release of toxins and then more toxins stored in the fatty tissue versus being able to clear them. I think we've talked a lot about that. So here are the nutrients that are incredibly important when you think about supporting detoxification pathways. You'll see lots of B vitamins in phase 1, lots of proteins that you're going to see in phase 2. So we want to look at, again, very balanced. We want to be able to get rid of those activated intermediates, get them to clear through the system, be inert, so our bodies can handle detoxification in a healthy way. So what can cause impaired detoxification? So one is that people have way too many toxins for their bodies to be able to handle. And so that can happen if, again, if it's an environmental issue, if people are working in an environment with an overwhelming toxic load, if they're living in a city like Hong Kong, where they have to wear masks all the time because of the levels of pollution, or there's different kinds of scenarios that people are exposed to. So that could be one of the situations that's causing an issue. There could be impaired excretion. So one of my rules with detoxification is never do a detoxification program if the patient is constipated. We first have to get the bowels moving appropriately. We need digestion working sufficiently. We don't want to make sure, we don't want to be trying to clear the body of toxins and then the body not actually able to get rid of that toxicity. So even someone who has really slow digestion, that's not going to be helpful for a detoxification process. So you'll notice that we always have a fiber type of a product in our detoxification programs because we want to make sure that that system is working well. And so some patients will even need to start a fiber kind of a support, like a prebiotic, probiotic type of support before they actually start the detoxification program. In terms of the renal dysfunction, we want to make sure that the kidneys are well supported through this, which the type of work there, the type of products that we use actually provide kidney support as well. We might have inefficient fuels, so meaning they might be eating way too many carbohydrates, not enough protein. It just depends on the individual. It depends on what their exercise level is, how they're using their body, what their stress level is like. Sometimes there's a deficiency of detoxifying substances, meaning if they're not really eating any vegetables, if they're not having, if they don't have enough of the protein or the vitamins, that can just, it just doesn't work well. So we want to make sure they're supported on every single level as we go through. And I did it again. Okay, that's me moving forward. So what do you actually do? So detox myths, I will say the majority of your time, I shouldn't even use the word majority, but a lot of the time our bodies can do pretty well on their own. They're designed to detoxify themselves. But there are times in our life that our bodies definitely need extra support. And so I would say, yes, our bodies do detoxify themselves, but a detoxification process, especially when someone's become inflamed or they've got other lifestyle issues going on or circumstances that they can't control, they definitely can benefit from liver, kidney support, raising the pH of the body and helping the body move into a state where it can detoxify very specifically and in a very supported way. And then the detoxifying myths, again, like fasting. Fasting typically does not work for most people. There are some people that can do it, but again, because it really encourages that phase 1 of detoxification, but doesn't help with phase 2, we've got other issues with fasting. And then other juice diets, other popular detox products. That one in the radio that I was hearing that all spring, and they were trying to promote people feeling good in their bathing suit or whatever. And I'm just, it really wasn't, if we look at the science behind detoxification, it really wasn't a well-supported product. But there's always things like that coming out on the market. And so it's being aware of what your body actually needs in the physiological process so that you know how to support yourself. So we've talked about this, and so we, if anybody has questions on it, please write them into the chat box. But fasting can really increase the amount of stress and inflammation within the body. As well as I think it's pretty hard to live if you're trying to work or you have kids or like you're working at home, all of these kinds of things. I would say fasting can be pretty difficult for a lot of people for extended time periods. We're talking like a week is what some detoxification programs recommend. So, but just remember, it's an energy dependent process. Your body needs calories, it needs energy, it needs to be able to get rid of what your body is trying to clear. And so fasting is just not my favorite. So we'll move on. So I just want to go through this quickly in terms of how does care affect your detoxification system. So because what we are working on with the adjustment process is the nervous system, we're allowing nerve tension patterns to clear, we're allowing inflammation to clear from the body. Every time you get adjusted, it's going to cause a slight detoxification response, which is why a lot of patients, if they don't drink water after their adjustments, they end up with a headache, or they can even talk about like tenderness on the top of their head. But when your nervous system is working more efficiently and we start to decrease physiological stress levels from the nervous system and from the body itself, it actually can enhance that detoxification process and help to heal inflammation and clear inflammation from the body. So that can play such a role. So I'd say, like, if you're going to be doing a really intensive if we're going to do like a 10-day detoxification process, your adjustments are even more important that week to really support the nervous system in that process so that you can get the best result from the nutritional piece of that support that you're doing as well. And so again, we talked about that, but each adjustment can make a difference. So for anyone who's interested in that, we definitely want to support their bodies, but I have a lot of patients that are referred to our office for detoxification, and there's often a lot of other health issues going on. So I always mention this, if there's anyone that you feel like needs our help, we will gladly do, we are doing a $49 referral fee for a consult and their exam, and they're reviewing their test results. So just let us know if you have someone in mind that you know that needs our help. We would love to be able to help. So these are things to think about that I just want things on an everyday basis I would love for people to be doing, and just things to keep in mind. Again, I don't want you to feel crazy about food, or that that you can't eat certain things, or you could never eat out again, or anything like that. But these are ideas that can be very supportive in terms of supporting your body's natural systems for detoxifying on an everyday basis that can become part of lifestyle. So number one is that I want you to be drinking adequate amounts of water. So half your body weight in ounces of water is the typical recommendation. It's what the literature says. Now that is, how do we say that? That is a sea level recommendation. So that typically is not enough for living in Colorado. So I want you to just keep increasing and increasing the amounts of water that you drink. If you feel like your mate might be very toxic right now, water typically doesn't taste very good to you. And so what I do all the time, and that has helped a lot of patients, I feel like in terms of ideas, is I'll put I typically will use a metal water bottle, and then I'll put a couple drops of lemon essential oil in that, or you could put fresh lemon in it too, but that will actually help the body become less acidic, which sounds weird because it's lemon, but less acidic and more alkaline. But the more water you drink, typically the more you'll actually crave it and want it. And so it takes a while for your body to learn to hold on to that, especially in this kind of weather. Electrolytes can be very helpful, but we want your body to be hydrated. And so that's one thing that I would really start to pay attention to. Organic food as much as you can. And so especially if you're going to do meat, if you can do organic meat, if you can do free range meat, that makes a big difference in terms of the toxicity load, as well as getting higher levels of nutrients into the body. Organic vegetables are incredibly important, organic fruits and berries. But just because we are exposed to so many pesticides on a regular basis, the more we can avoid them, the better. We're going to talk about a modified elimination diet, but every patient I work with is different. I have some patients that can never eat gluten, that can never eat dairy. I have some patients that avoid it a lot of the time, but they can have it sometimes. I have patients that cannot eat sugar at all. I have patients that maybe have moderate amounts of sugar and they do just fine with that. Everybody is different. And you can use the elimination diet that we've laid out in the detoxification program as kind of a marker of to see how your body does, taking away some foods that might be higher inflammatory foods. But when you take them away, you can definitely get a sense of how you feel without those foods. So a lot of our patients will use this program as like an elimination diet and see how they do taking away different foods that they maybe know are causing them issues. But doing this process actually makes them very aware of what works and what doesn't for their body. Lots of antioxidants. So you want to think of lots of dark leafy greens, green vegetables in general, but just think of vegetables and berries and fruits. But I definitely would prefer that you get a higher load of vegetables with some fruit. And it's a great time of year to be eating a huge variety of maybe berries or peaches or all kinds of different types of produce, but you're going to get the biggest load of antioxidants from your dark leafy greens, and your broccoli is a great source, and cauliflower. Those cruciferous vegetables are so incredibly important in terms of supporting detoxification. So I know having we use a rice cooker all the time. I think I did a Facebook video on it a while ago, but we use a rice cooker all the time to steam broccoli or vegetables in general. But we usually have some of those almost, gosh, at every dinner. But so the nutrients specifically in cruciferous vegetables are great for liver support. But think of like just a wide variety of colorful vegetables can be great in terms of just increasing your antioxidant load in general. And then we want some kind of protein with every meal. So whether you're a meat eater or not, that's okay. But we just want to make sure that there's a protein with every meal to support that phase 2 part of the detoxification process. Not only will you feel better and have better energy and have like a more stabilized blood sugar with protein, but it does make a difference in the detoxification process on a consistent basis. Okay. These are just a few foods to keep in mind that we've got. So I wrote down apples, beets, and carrots. It's one of my favorite combinations of produce. And the reason I say that is because they each play critical roles in the detoxification process. So apples have malic acid, which actually keeps the bile within the liver, helps it removing waste on a consistent basis. So you don't even need to eat a whole apple. Maybe just half an apple would make a big difference if you had half an apple every single day. Or maybe a whole apple if you really want the whole apple, eat the whole apple. Beets, the betaine in beets actually assist phase 1 and phase 2 of the cleansing process, and carrots are full of fiber and vitamin A, great for liver function. So just a simple idea. I think I've got so many patients that do ABCs, multiple times a week because they feel so good when they do that combination of antioxidants. And you think of a lot of color, you got a lot of different colors in that as well. So you're getting a lot of different nutrients with that combination. Lifestyle recommendations. So light to moderate exercise. Now, I have patients who exercise really intensely. I have patients who walk for exercise. I have patients who do yoga. Everybody's different. I want you to listen to your body. But the great thing about exercise is I would love for you to get some kind of a sweat going on a consistent basis, because again, so much of our detoxification happens through the skin. So we hit on the liver. We talked a little bit about the digestive tract, the small intestine specifically for a detox. But if you think of anytime you can get a sweat going, your body's able to release some toxins and chemicals with that. So such an awesome thing. If you have access to a sauna, again, a great way to get a sweat going. Infrared saunas are incredibly popular right now, and they are wonderful at helping to detoxify. So what I will say about that, though, is that if you're really toxic, you might get into that infrared sauna for 2 minutes or 1 minute. Sounds weird. You might work up to 10 minutes. You don't need to be in that for a long time to get a really good result. And if you're really toxic and it's a chronic thing, we want to address that slowly and in a supported way. We don't want to just go like, okay, now I did 30 minutes in infrared sauna. That person probably would not be able to move for the rest of the day. They would be absolutely exhausted because it pushed detoxification too much. But these are just things like I have patients who use an infrared sauna once a week, sometimes twice a week. But that can be such a supportive lifestyle measure that you can take that can make a big difference. Extra rest if needed. A lot of people in the first couple days when they're starting a detoxification program are just tired. They just feel like they need more rest. They need more downtime. Work on stress relief. Stress is a huge player in toxicity. So the more stressed we are, the more inflamed our bodies get. And so sometimes it's as simple as taking breathing breaks. So breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth for a count of 10. I've got all of this kind of these ideas written in the detoxification comprehensive guide that we made. But they're just things to think about, because the better you handle your stress, the less toxic you are, which is kind of cool. And doesn't mean the stress is going to go away. It just means that we're handling it better. Deep breathing, we just talked about, it can be incredibly helpful in helping to reset the nervous system. A skin brush, so dry skin brushing can make a difference as well. So dry skin brushing actually helps to remove toxicity from the skin and helps with the lymph flow. And if you're doing something like that, you would start like on the, like maybe by your hand or wrist or at the bottom of your leg, and you would go in very light circular motions towards the center of the body. And that can actually stimulate lymph flow beautifully, which again helps to detoxify. Massage is another great tool. It helps to move the lymph through the system, and the lymph carries toxicity throughout the body. And so we want to keep that moving, and it can help move the toxicity again towards the soft tissue to be excreted as well. So this is the cool one. So much of the toxic elements appeared to be excreted through sweat. And this happens, I mean, these studies have happened over and over and over again. But the more that we don't want to sweat excessively, I'm not telling anyone that that's a fun thing, but when you can get a good sweat going, it can make such a difference in terms of your overall well-being. I will say too, I think with the people who feel so much better with exercise and kind of become addicted to exercise almost in a way, that can be a piece of it, is that they feel so much better when they get a sweat. And so a lot of patients with chronic issues, with chronic toxicity, have issues with sleep, issues with digestion, all the things that we talked about, all those sensitivities. And so getting a sweat can be such a liberating thing in terms of someone's health and feeling better. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the program. So when people, I'm hoping I've made it clear that there's a lot of all of these things, if we go back to them: how you eat, how you move your body, how you think about your lifestyle. Maybe it's, more yoga, maybe it's more exercise, it's keeping your adjustments on track, it's drinking water, it's planning to have a good salad for lunch. I mean, whatever you can do, there's going to be times in your life where you can be really well supported with detoxification. And there's going to be times when you can't, and you're just going to do the best you can. And maybe a couple times a month you get some of these things in. Life has that ebb and that flow to it. And so we want to do the best we can on a consistent basis. I mean, it's going to look different at different times of our lives. But for clients who have had long-term, that we have the clients who have real chronic issues, we have clients who've gone through maybe a time period where they needed to take an antibiotic for a time period, or they've been on a medication for a period of time, or they've gone through a real high stress time period. Then those are times when we want to do more of a supportive detoxification process. And so what I'm going to talk about is the 10-day process that Dr. Scott and I have designed. But if you feel like you need more of an extensive detoxification process, let us know. And, it might be something that we've talked about in the past as well, but you will be emailed the detoxification handout. So it will be an email, and I believe, just so you guys know, it will come from Wellevate. That should have the detoxify, the guide attached to it, as well as a list of products that you would need if you were going to do more of a 10-day supported detoxification process. And so the things that we used for that are one product in specifically. I've changed this product over the years, but now Ultra Clear Renew has become an absolute favorite, and it's well researched. And it continues to be updated as more and more research comes out, which is pretty cool. So it's easily digested, it's low allergen potential. So there's a pea and a rice base to it. It's easy to use. It's got all the specific nutrients to support phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification. It's nutrient dense. It comes in, so when we say it's easily digested, it's in a powder form. So when you drink that and you blend it with water, or however you decide to make that, you're getting those nutrients into your system right away. It doesn't have to be broken down like it would if it just came in a capsule. So it's basically a food-based product. And what I love about it is that it also addresses pH. So when we get really toxic, our bodies have been through a really stressed time period and we're more inflamed, our pH is too acidic. And so we need to raise that pH, which Ultra Clear Renew will do, especially when you combine it with the appropriate dietary kinds of things, the strategies that we've talked about, which is laid out in the whole guide. So it talks about how you would need to eat, how you would need to add in that Ultra Clear Renew, but it will also address heavy metal toxicity. So this is the product that a lot of my engineering people are on when they've been exposed to heavy metals for a long time period, but we're exposed to heavy metals all the time. So, I mean, it actually, Ultra Clear Renew actually upregulates your body's natural ability to clear heavy metals. And so it's pretty powerful in terms of what it can do on a physiological level. But I love that it addresses the pH, it addresses the heavy metals, but it also supports phase 1 and phase 2 of detoxification in that process. So what we added with that, and so again, we've done this program for many, many years. And so we've had a chance to improve it and change it over the years as we learned more and gone through this process with so many patients. But we always add some kind of a fiber support to that. And so FiberMend is an easily tolerated fiber product. And so there are things out there that are not well supported out there that don't support the digestive system well, or that can be really harsh. This is not harsh, but it's full of prebiotics that actually support the good bacteria within the gut. So we're giving the gut food, we're giving it the right nutrients. And then as we're starting to, so we're basically doing gut healing. We're trying to really enhance the gut healing process as we're going through the detoxification process. We use Advoclear. So we use the Advoclear product, Metagenics Advoclear. That is a form of B vitamins that gives us a lot of oomph, or kind of like a lot of support for the phase 1. Thorne FiberMend is going to give support for phase 2. So all of this kind of blending into phase 1 and phase 2 support. And then we typically will use Ultraflora Balance through that product through the detox process as well, which as you're clearing the system, you're also rebuilding gut health. And so having the good bacteria for long-term detoxification support. So the more good bacteria your gut has, the better you detoxify yourself on an everyday basis. So that plays a role as well. But the FiberMend actually feeds that good bacteria that you're giving your body. So when you look through the guide, you'll see that it has all of that laid out of how you use those products, kind of dietary recommendations, so that you have an idea of what you need to prepare for as you go into this process so you can make the most out of it. And then we'll just talk about quickly, so what we put for what you will be getting, and I have to look, I think our just checking here. So it looks like what we're going to be doing is sending you an email that will have all of the supplement recommendations, all of that stuff. I work with a virtual assistant. She just texted me, so it looks like I need to make sure that she's got all of the right stuff, but you'll be getting that email within the next 24 hours. So just know that that email will be coming to you from Wellevate. It will have all of the recommendations and the guide in it. But all of that is 15% off right now, and the guide is free. So you have all the information that you need, and we are available here to ask or to answer any questions and just help support you. And as you go through that process, just know it is a process, and most of our clients feel maybe a little bit more tired after the first couple days. They definitely need to just be thinking about the water, eating as cleanly as possible, getting light movement, getting a sweat, which is easy to do in this hot weather. But that kind of support makes a huge difference. And then as you go through it, typically by like day 3, day 4, clients feel really good. So they start to feel more energy, more clarity. Better sleep can make a huge difference in terms of the whole process. So I'm hoping that I explained that. I feel there's a lot of information there, but if anyone has questions, please type them in the Q&A box and I will make sure that we get to them. If anybody has them. I'm just going to check her text that she just sent me so I can make sure that I'm giving you the correct information for the supplements. Perfect. So she's going to be sending out those, all the recommendations tonight, so you have those. But any other questions that I can help with? Okay, so Lori said, is it okay to mix Ultra Clear? Yes. So she's asking, is it okay to mix the Ultra Clear in a smoothie? It definitely is. What I'm going to tell you though, this is the key with this, is because there's so many nutrients in the Ultra Clear Renew. And so when say you're like, my favorite smoothie, I'll add like a handful of blueberries and a whole bunch of frozen greens, and I might add like some flaxseed or whatever. So I'll add all that stuff together and I'll get it in the blender and I'll blend that up so that it's pretty smooth by the time I add the Ultra Clear Renew. And then, so I'll stop the blender, add the Ultra Clear Renew, blend it for maybe like 20 seconds, and then it's done. And so we just don't want that Ultra Clear Renew to break down too much, because it can actually it can taste weird. You're basically, breaking it down even further. So put it at the end of that process, but it's totally okay to use in a smoothie. Good question. Okay, so can the exogenous ketones, so I've got some clients who are doing keto right now as well, can exogenous ketones affect the cleanse? They're actually very helpful in that process, because you're actually giving the body, the cells, very supportive nutrients and helping with the electrolyte balance in the system. So no problem to take the exogenous ketones. They're not going to hurt the process at all. I hope that helps, but totally fine to do that. Any other questions, or if I need to clarify anything that I just said, to let me know. Okay, well, I do not see any other questions. I hope that I hope that I was able to answer. I hope I was able to answer those questions efficiently. And I think next month we're actually going to do our first live class again. We're going to do a class on phases and stages and network care, and we're going to do examples and get into the emotional aspects of care and the healing process, which is one of my absolute favorite classes to do. Which we tried to duplicate with the videos, and we've still got those going out, and we'll have access to those for our clients as well. But I'm hoping that this was a helpful process. And if you have any questions, let us know. Our virtual assistant just sent us the email that you'll be receiving. So I will make sure I look that over. And so she'll get that to you either within the next couple hours or tomorrow. So she'll make sure she gets it to you within the next 24 hours. But it has the whole comprehensive guide that we've created for the detoxification process, and we just recently updated. So if you have any questions on that, or you need any information, please let us know. And if you have any questions too about anything that maybe needs to be tailored for your individual situation, or you're more concerned about chronic issues, a lot of our clients need to go through, like, we're talking like maybe a month kind of a supported detoxification process. Sometimes that needs to happen as well. So everybody's different, but we feel really good about this 10-day program too. If it's something that you're just like, gosh, I need to reset my system, or maybe it's been the summer and I've been kind of, I always think the summer is hard, especially with kids and schedules and all that kind of stuff, to keep on track with everything else. But if you feel like you need more support right now, or you just like, gosh, I just need to clean it up for a period of time and get my nutrition back on track, it can be an amazing way to do that. A lot of clients will lose belly fat when they detoxify as well. So there's so many reasons that people do this, but we just want you to have a really great foundation for your health, to feel great as you're going through a healing process, or sometimes just maybe need more support as you go through that healing process. So I hope it was helpful. Thank you guys so much for coming tonight. And I hope to see you soon. Thank you.